The entire studio fell silent. It was supposed to be a regular interview. Mike Tyson, the former heavyweight champion, was on a major American morning show to discuss his memoir and Netflix documentary. He looked calm, a little tired, but sharp. As ever, the cameras rolled. The host smiled. "Mike, you've seen it all, but we have something today you didn't expect." Mike raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" The producer handed the host a cream-colored envelope with gold writing. "This letter arrived last night from West Africa, from the president of Burkina Faso, Ibrahim Traoré." The audience fell silent. Even Mike's jaw clenched slightly. "He said it was for you, only you, but he agreed we could read it live if you wanted." Mike nodded slowly, unsure. "Go ahead," he said. What happened next was not just shocking. It was soul-shaking. The letter would unlock something buried deep in Mike, something the world had never truly seen. Not the fighter, not the showman, but the broken boy behind the gloves. And the leader who reached him across continents. The host unfolded the letter and began reading slowly. "Dear Mr. Tyson, my name is Ibrahim Traoré, President of the Transition of Burkina Faso. I do not write this to you as a politician. I write this as a boy who once had nothing and saw you fight on a flickering TV in a crowded room." Mike looked stunned. His breathing changed. "You were not just a boxer, you were proof. Proof that pain could be turned into power. That a boy from nowhere could stand before giants and make them fall." Mike leaned forward. The host continued, "When my country was hurting, I remembered your eyes in the ring, not your fists, your eyes. The pain, the fire, the refusal to be broken. And now, I try to lead my people with that same fire." The room was silent. "Thank you, Mike Tyson, for teaching me to rise, not as a fighter, but as a man." Mike looked away, his voice cracked. Just stop for a second." Tears were already forming. He tried to smile, but something inside him had shattered, and the world was about to see what was left. The host gently placed the letter on the table. Mike Tyson's hands were shaking. The studio had never been so quiet. You could hear the lights hum. Mike looked down, trying to hold back tears, but it was no use. They came slow at first, then heavy. He saw me," Mike whispered. "Not the knockouts, not the fame, just me." He wiped his face, but the tears kept coming. "I was 14, homeless, angry. I wanted to die. Back then, nobody knew. Nobody cared." The audience gasped. "I fought because it was the only way anyone looked at me." Then he looked into the camera. "But to know that halfway across the world, someone watched me and became something... a president... He broke down completely. No cameras cut away. No one dared move. The most feared man in the ring was now the most human man in the room. And in that moment, it wasn't about boxing, it was about being seen. And the boy who once had no voice had now helped another boy become a leader. From pain came purpose. From punches came peace. And from a letter came healing. After the show cut to commercial, Mike sat in silence, still wiping his eyes. The host leaned in quietly, asking, "Do you want to continue?" Mike nodded. "Yes, the world needs to hear this." The cameras came back on, but this time there was no script, no promotional questions, just raw truth. "Ibrahim Traoré," Mike said, his voice thick with emotion. "I never met you, but I feel like I know you." He held the letter close like it was something sacred. "I wasn't supposed to survive my youth. I was a thief, a fighter. I was locked up before I knew love." The crowd leaned in. "But this man, this president, he saw strength in my suffering." He paused. "Nobody talks about the pain, the hunger, the nights you pray not to wake up. But this letter told me I wasn't alone." The studio, once filled with laughter and lights, was now a place of reflection. One man's tears had become another man's message, and now the world was listening. That same evening, halfway across the world, President Ibrahim Traoré sat alone in his modest office in Ouagadougou. The lights were dim, the fan buzzed overhead. The security team waited outside, giving him space. He was watching the interview live. When Mike cried, Traoré looked down, wiping his own tears quietly. He felt it. He whispered in French. He really felt it. Behind him, the wall was lined with photos, not of presidents, but of young children in dusty schools. Farmers, nurses, soldiers, his people, and next to them, a small framed photo of a young Mike Tyson, standing shirtless, fists clenched, eyes burning. It wasn't about boxing. It was about the spirit. A few feet away, his assistant entered the room with an update. The UN just reached out. They saw the interview. They want to talk about your education reforms again. Ibrahim nodded. Let them wait. Tonight the world doesn't need politics. He turned back to the screen. Tonight it needs truth. Back in New York, the interview had gone viral. Within hours, it reached millions. Clips of Mike Tyson weeping over Ibrahim Traoré's letter flooded the internet. Celebrities shared it, schools played it, refugee camps in Africa cheered. But it wasn't over, because just after midnight, Mike's phone rang. Unknown number, international code. He hesitated, then answered. Hello? A calm, deep voice responded. Mr. Tyson, this is Ibrahim Traoré. Silence. Mike's throat tightened. You're the guy from the letter? Yes. And you're the man who taught me how to survive when I was just a boy with no shoes? They didn't speak like leaders or legends. They spoke like survivors. Thank you, Mike whispered. No, Traoré replied. Thank you.
Yes.
You gave me the courage to stand up when the world told me to kneel. A pause. Mike, would you come to Burkina Faso? Mike blinked, stunned. What for? Not for a fight. For hope. And in that moment, two men born on different continents, scarred by different battles, had found a bridge through pain, and something extraordinary had just begun. Mike Tyson didn't sleep that night. After speaking with Ibrahim Traoré, he stared at the letter again, reading it over and over. There were no fancy words, just truth. One line echoed in his head. When I was 13, I fought, not with gloves, but with hunger. That was Mike's life too. He remembered stealing food from corner stores in Brooklyn, fighting bullies, getting locked up at a juvenile center. Nobody believed in him except one trainer. It's just like Ibrahim had no one until he believed in himself. The next morning, Mike's team entered his dressing room. They had a schedule lined up, brand deals, training, shoots, media appearances. But he tore it up. I'm flying to Burkina Faso. They stared in shock. Mike, are you sure? He looked at them with the same fire he had in the ring. It's not about boxing anymore. It's about the kid I was, and the boy he still is. 2 days later, Mike arrived in Ouagadougou. There were no red carpets, no paparazzi, just dust, sun, and faces that glowed with disbelief. Children ran barefoot alongside his car, screaming, Mike Tyson. Mike Tyson? But he wasn't there to be a hero. President Traoré greeted him at the modest government house with no cameras, no rehearsed smiles, just a handshake that lasted longer than expected. They didn't talk politics, they talked pain. Traoré took Mike to a rural school with broken walls, but loud laughter. One of the boys had a swollen eye from a street fight. Mike sat beside him on the floor. You fight? He asked. The boy nodded. Me too, Mike whispered. But you know, the strongest punch, it's the one you don't throw. He gave the boy his championship ring to hold for a moment. The boy's hands trembled, and just then, Traoré knelt beside them. In this country, he said, you are not your scars. You are your spirit, the boy cried, and so did Mike. That night, the president and the boxer sat on a rooftop overlooking the glowing lights of a quiet Burkina Faso. Traoré handed Mike a box. Inside were dozens of letters, all written by children across the country. They heard about the letter I sent you. Now they wrote to you. Mike opened one. Dear Mike Tyson, you are a lion who made it through fire. Please don't forget us. Another read. My papa died fighting to protect our village, but now I believe I can be strong like you. Tears rolled down Mike's cheeks. He clutched the letters like they were gold. These are worth more than belts, more than anything I ever... One Traoré nodded. And now you see, brother. Pain connects us more than fame ever could. The air was still, Not a sound but the wind rustling through the pages of those letters. And in that quiet, a bond was sealed, not by power, not by politics, but by two broken boys who survived. As Mike flipped through the last letter, one stood out. It was written on torn notebook paper. Dear Mr. Tyson, my name is Marty. I am 11 years old. My father was a soldier. He said your fights gave him courage. He died last year. Now I try to be brave. I heard you cry. That means even lions cry. So maybe I can cry too. Mike's hands shook. He remembered being 11, watching his own mother fade away and feeling like the world had no room for boys like him. He whispered, almost to himself, even lions cry. Boy President Traoré looked at him, eyes filled with silent understanding. That boy, Marty, lives nearby. Would you like to meet him?
No, Mike
didn't answer with words. He just nodded. The next morning, they drove for 2 hours through dusty roads, passing goats, women balancing water, and boys playing football with plastic bags. When they arrived, Marty ran out barefoot, his face lit with awe. He wasn't meeting a boxer. He was meeting a broken warrior, just like himself. In an unexpected and deeply emotional moment on live television, Hollywood legend Morgan Freeman was handed a letter from Ibrahim Traoré, president of Burkina Faso. As Freeman began to read, the studio fell silent. Then, something unprecedented happened. He broke down in tears. What was in the letter, and why did it move him so profoundly? This powerful exchange left millions around the world inspired and stunned. It was a calm Thursday morning in Los Angeles. Morgan Freeman sat comfortably on the set of a morning talk show. Host Olivia Sanders smiled, asking about his latest film. The audience clapped, sipping coffee, enjoying his familiar voice. Suddenly, Olivia paused. We have something special for you today, she said, reaching under her seat. She handed Morgan a plain brown envelope with just one line, from President Ibrahim Traoré, Burkina Faso. The moment turned quiet. Even the cameras seemed to freeze. Morgan held the envelope like it was sacred, his hands trembling slightly. The host remained silent. The audience leaned in, breath held. He slowly opened the flap. As his eyes scanned the first few lines, his expression changed. His smile faded, his lips parted, but no words came out. Then his voice cracked. The room was silent. The world was about to witness something unprecedented. Morgan's fingers tightened around the paper. For a man who had lived decades on camera, this moment was different. He cleared his throat and began to read softly, to the voice that carried our stories when we were forgotten. To the man who brought dignity to our pain with every word spoken. The room fell deeper into silence. The camera zoomed gently on his face. His hands shook. You didn't just act, you healed. You didn't just narrate, you resurrected our dignity. His voice cracked again. A single tear rolled down his cheek. Olivia, the host, was visibly moved, but remained silent, giving him space. I am writing from a country many have overlooked, but not you. In your voice, we heard ourselves. In your roles, we saw our fathers, our hopes. Morgan stopped. He couldn't read further. He dropped the letter onto his lap and covered his face with both hands. The man who narrated the world's pain was now living his own moment of raw truth, all because of a letter from an unexpected president. For several seconds, no one spoke. Then a soft sob came from the audience. A woman in the front row had tears streaming down her face. Another man beside her held his chest, visibly moved. Morgan tried to compose himself, wiping his face gently with a handkerchief. I wasn't ready for this, he whispered, his voice trembling. This is different. He looked up. At Olivia, eyes still wet. I've received awards, standing ovations, honorary degrees, but no letter, no gesture has ever done this to me. The host reached for his hand, not to comfort a guest, but to connect with a human soul unraveling in real time. Olivia turned to the camera and said softly, You just witnessed something real, something rare, a message from one leader to another. Across oceans, across time, behind the scenes, producers were frozen. No one dared cut to commercial. Online, the clip was already going viral. People were reposting it with a simple caption, "Morgan Freeman cries on live TV, and we cried with him." But what was in the rest of the letter? That mystery was only just beginning. That night, Morgan Freeman didn't sleep. The letter stayed open on his nightstand beside a dim lamp. He read it over and over, each time slower. There was a paragraph he hadn't read on air, too personal, too intense. "I grew up in a small village in northern Burkina Faso," the letter read. "We had no running water, no electricity, but once a month, a truck would come with a generator and a screen and we watched movies." Morgan paused, hand over his chest. "The first voice I ever heard in English was yours. I didn't understand the words, but I felt them." Tears welled up again. The next morning, Morgan called the show's producers. "I want to finish reading the letter on air," he said. Back at the studio, the producers hesitated. It wasn't scheduled, not part of the promo tour. But after seeing the online reaction, millions of views overnight, they said yes, Morgan would return to finish what began. But neither he nor the world was ready for what came next. The studio was packed, cameras ready. No music, no intro, just silence. Morgan Freeman walked onto the stage with the letter in hand. No script, no teleprompter. Olivia greeted him, but he just nodded, looked at the audience, and began. "This letter is not just for me. It's for all of us." He read the next part aloud. "When I became a soldier, I carried your words in my heart. Hope is a thing with feathers, you once quoted. I remembered that every night in the forest." The room went quiet again. "Mr. Freeman, your voice gave me courage. I now lead a country that still fights for its breath, but I've never forgotten that voice. That voice gave me back my name." At that line, Olivia gasped softly. Then Morgan paused, looking up slowly, his eyes heavy. How does a man respond to something like this? People at home were crying. This is not a letter. This is a mirror to the soul. But the letter wasn't done yet, and the most emotional part hadn't even been revealed. Just as Morgan was folding the letter, a small photo slipped out and fluttered to the floor. He picked it up slowly. It was a black and white image, a little boy, barefoot, standing in front of a torn sheet hung between two sticks, a makeshift movie screen. Behind him, other children sat on logs, staring at the image of Nelson Mandela. Being portrayed on the screen, Morgan's voice caught. "That's me," he whispered. "That's from Invictus." Olivia leaned in. "You're their hero." Morgan flipped the photo over. In careful handwriting, it read, "This is the night I decided I would one day help my people. And your voice gave me that dream." The studio fell completely silent. Even the camera crew wiped their eyes. Then Morgan turned to the live camera. "President Traoré, if you are watching, please know this. Your letter changed me. It reminded me why I ever stepped in front of a camera." Backstage, producers were getting calls from major networks. People were not just watching, they were feeling. And millions around the world were waiting to hear what came next. While the letter was making headlines across the world, a quiet but urgent request was sent from Ouagadougou to Los Angeles. President Traoré wanted to meet Morgan Freeman privately, no cameras. No press, just a meeting between two men, one who spoke through film and the other who lived its message. At first, Morgan was unsure. His schedule was packed, his heart still shaken. But something about the letter wouldn't let him rest. 3 days after the broadcast, Morgan boarded a plane. Destination, Burkina Faso. On board, he stared out the window. Clutching the folded letter, he whispered to himself, "I need to look this man in the eye." As the plane crossed the Atlantic, social media exploded with hashtags like hashtag the letter that broke Freeman and hashtag Traoré and Morgan. But none of them knew this journey was about to uncover something far deeper, something buried. In Morgan's own past, something he never told the world. And it all connected back to a dusty village, a projector screen, and a boy with a dream. The sun was just rising when the jet touched, down in Burkina Faso. Morgan was greeted with little fanfare, just a single government car and a translator. Named AWA. On the drive, AWA spoke softly. "The president. He doesn't show this side to many, but your letter. It meant everything to him." Morgan looked at her. "Why me?" She smiled. "Because you gave him hope when hope was hard to find." They drove through villages waking to life. Women fetching water, children walking barefoot to school, men fixing broken bicycles. Everything was so real. When they arrived at the presidential compound, Ibrahim Traoré was already waiting. He wore no suit, no medals, just a plain shirt and calm eyes. Morgan stepped out of the car slowly. The two men looked at each other, no words, just silence. Then a quiet, mutual nod. Traoré stepped forward, holding a faded photo. "Do you remember this boy?" Morgan took it. It was the same black and white photo, but now clearer. The boy's eyes, they were his own when he was young. "Wait. This child looks like my cousin," Morgan whispered. Ibrahim placed a hand on his shoulder. "He wasn't just watching you. He was waiting for you." Inside the compound, the president led Morgan to a quiet garden. No bodyguards, no aides. There, under a wide tree, Ibrahim began to speak, not as a politician, but as a boy who remembered. "After my father died, I lost everything," he said.
Dad.
"But I found a new father through a voice that told stories that gave broken people dignity." Morgan sat in silence, his hands shaking slightly. Then Traoré leaned in. "There's something I never told the world. I had a brother. His name was Cozy. He looked exactly like you." Morgan's breath caught. "I had a cousin named Cozy. We lost him. No one ever found out where he went." Traoré reached into his folder, pulled out a worn paper. It was a photo of Cozy standing beside a younger Ibrahim, both smiling. Morgan froze. "We shared stories about you every night until the day he disappeared. It was about family history, pain. The past wasn't just meeting the present. It was calling out for healing." Morgan knew there was more to this journey than he ever imagined. Marty stood frozen. He clutched a picture of his father in a soldier's uniform, creased and weathered like it had been held to many nights under his pillow. Mike knelt down, eye to eye with him. "You're braver than I ever was, little man." Marty blinked, tears brimming. "But I cry." Mike smiled softly. Without warning, the boy stepped forward and hugged him, not the kind of hug for pictures or cameras, but the kind you give when you're scared someone will leave again. Mike held him tight. And then he broke out. Tears poured down his face. Loud sobs, the kind that shake a man's whole body. The cameras had been left behind. The crew stayed respectfully distant. But President Traoré stood nearby, hand over his chest, eyes glassy. It was not just a hug between a child and a legend. It was pain meeting pain, loss meeting loss, and healing being born in the middle. As they sat under a mango tree, Marty asked quietly, "Will you leave too?" Mike looked him in the eye. "I'll be back. I promise." And this time, he meant it. Mike returned to America 2 days later. An interview was already scheduled on a major network. What was supposed to be a simple conversation about boxing took a different turn. The host joked, "You've been off the grid, Mike." "Africa, huh? What were you doing? Starting a new fight club?" Mike chuckled, then paused. "Actually, I was being healed by an 11-year-old boy." The room went silent. He pulled out Marty's letter. The audience listened. "Even lions cry," he read aloud, voice cracking. And then, right there on live TV, the most feared boxer in history cried. The studio froze. No one knew what to say. The host's smile faded into quiet respect. He'd met kids who've lost everything, and yet they have more heart than most champions I've ever seen. He looked straight into the camera. "Ibrahim Traoré, thank you for reminding me that real strength isn't fists, it's love." There wasn't a dry eye in the room, and across the world, millions watched in silence. Some cried, some smiled, but all of them felt something they hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. The day after the emotional interview, Mike's phone rang. It was early morning. He didn't recognize the number, but something made him answer. Tyson, the voice asked gently. Yes, who's this? This is Ibrahim Traoré, president of Burkina Faso. There was a pause. Then Troy said, I saw what you did for Marty. You didn't just honor his father. You healed something in him and in you. Mike was quiet, moved by the sincerity in Troy's voice. I want to invite you back, Troy continued. But this time, not just for one boy, for a nation. I want you to speak to the youth. Tell them your story. Show them what rising from nothing looks like. Mike exhaled deeply. His voice cracked. You don't know what that means to me, brother, Troy replied. I do. They made plans right there. In 48 hours, Mike was flying back. This wasn't about boxing anymore. It was about redemption. It was about using scars as a message. And for the first time in decades, Mike Tyson wasn't just fighting for himself, he was fighting for hope. The school in Ouagadougou was packed. Hundreds of students in faded uniforms sat on the dusty ground, waiting. Some held notebooks, others clutched photos of Tyson from old newspaper clippings. Mike arrived quietly, no flashy entourage, no stage lights, just him, a chair, and a translator. He began speaking. His words were slow, but each one hit like a punch. I used to think I was just a weapon. I didn't know I had a heart until I listened to a child. Told them about Marty, about his mother's death, about prison, about how he fought in the ring because he couldn't fight his pain anywhere else. Tears welled up in the eyes of boys who thought real men never cried. Mike stood up, walked into the crowd, and pointed at a boy. You think no one sees you, but I do. You're strong, even when you feel broken. The boy began crying, then another. President Traoré, standing at the back, wiped a tear from his cheek. This wasn't a speech. It was a revolution of hearts. That night, Mike sat beside President Traoré under the stars. They were quiet for a while. No cameras, no press. Just two men with heavy pasts and full hearts. Why did you write that letter, Mr. President? They finally asked. Traoré smiled softly. Because I saw the boy behind the fighter, and I believed the world still needed him. Mike didn't respond. He couldn't. His throat tightened. Then Traoré added, You remind my people that strength isn't about fists. It's about rising again and again after life knocks you down. Mike nodded. That's all I ever tried to do. They shook hands. They clasped hands like brothers, like two survivors. From different corners of the world, the next morning, photos of Mike's visit to the school went viral. But not for fame, for something deeper. People everywhere cried watching clips of him hugging children, telling them they mattered, reminding them that scars are not shameful. They're proof you survived. Mike Tyson left Burkina Faso not just as a boxing legend, but as a healer. And Ibrahim Traoré, the world saw him in a new light, not just a leader, but a listener of hearts. Back in New York, Mike Tyson returned. To the studio where everything had started, the host invited him back for a follow-up interview. The producers expected smiles and political niceties. What they got was silence. The lights dimmed. Mike looked older, wiser. His hands trembled slightly. The host asked, Mike, what changed? You, the most in Burkina Faso? Mike looked at the camera and whispered, a child and a president. He then reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small drawing. It was from Marty, the little boy from the village. A simple picture, Mike holding his hand. Ibrahim Traoré, behind them both, smiling. The studio went still. Mike choked on his words. He said he doesn't want to fight anymore. He just wants to grow. The audience held their breath. The host, usually quick with words, couldn't say a thing. Mike's voice cracked. That boy gave me peace. And Traoré, he gave me purpose. A tear rolled down his cheek. And for once, the world saw not a fighter, not a legend, but a man who was finally healing. After the show, Mike sat alone in his dressing room. A staff member walked in, holding a brown envelope. It just arrived. International mail, she said. Mike opened it carefully. Inside was a second letter from President Ibrahim Traoré. The handwriting was familiar, the words even more so. My brother Mike, they call me a president, but I am just a man who dreams dreams of healing, dreams of peace. Your visit reminded us all that pain is not the end. It's a beginning, if we dare to feel it, not fight it. Burkina Faso thanks you. I thank you. And the boy now sleeps peacefully. Mike stared at the paper. For the first time in years, he whispered a prayer, not for himself, but for every broken kid in the world and every leader with a heart. He pressed the letter to his chest. I was never the baddest man on the planet, he whispered. I was just a boy waiting to be heard. And finally, someone had listened. 1 week, that's all it took to turn pain into purpose. Mike Tyson stood on the balcony of a building in Harlem, watching a small group of kids sparring below. He wasn't their coach. He was just present. When one boy tripped, Mike didn't laugh. He walked down, lifted him up, and said, "Every fall teaches you how to rise." His phone buzzed. A photo from Burkina Faso. Marty was smiling, standing beside a brand new boxing gym. The gym was named Tyson Hope Center, sponsored by the Burkina Faso government, signed by President Traoré himself. Mike closed his eyes. The world had called him a monster. Now a boy across the ocean saw him as a mentor. And that... That was enough. The end. But your tears matter. If this story moved you, even a little, please like to show love. Subscribe for more true stories that heal. Comment below what moment made you cry the most. Let's fill this space with love, strength, and second chances. Because even the toughest fighters need someone to believe in them. Until the next story, stay human, stay kind.